All right, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening for those online. I'm Lucila Nwatu, and today I will be presenting the pre-approval inspection process. And this will be from the field inspector's perspective. So before we begin, I'd like to take a poll. By show of hands, how many of you have been through an FDA inspection? How many of you have been through a pre-approval inspection? Okay, so this may be a refresher for some. So this is the agenda for the presentation. So I'll first start by going over the pre-approval process. Then I'll go through the inspection objectives from the inspector's perspective. And then I'll give you some tips on how you can prepare for the pre-approval inspection. But first, some background. The regulatory basis for the pre-approval inspection comes from the Food and Drug and Cosmetic Act. The pre-approval inspection program has been shaped by many FDA initiatives, including the Pharmaceutical cGMP for the 21st Century initiative, with focus on risk-based approaches for evaluation of firms' manufacturing readiness and verification of the authenticity of submitted data, and most recently, the Program Alignment Initiative, and the Concepts of Operation CONOPS, which has vertically integrated and programmatically aligned the different FDA centers with ORA. When a firm is named in an application and performs a commercial function, the firm's compliance with cGMP must be evaluated. This includes, but not limited to, original, supplements, and amendments to the application, drug substance manufacturers, drug product manufacturers, and controlled testing laboratories. This does not mean that all sites require an inspection. In some cases, FDA may have sufficient current and pertinent information to arrive at a scientific decision on site acceptability without conducting a pre-approval inspection. Pre-approval inspections are determined by a risk-based approach to ensure that the inspection resources are directed to the greatest possible protection of public health. There is a system for determining which sites require an inspection, which is outlined in our compliance program for pre-approval inspections. In the old model, there was a list of criteria that, if met, would trigger a PAI. I won't go through all of the lists here, but a few include if you're the first person to file an application for your firm, if the establishment has never been inspected before, if there's new molecular entities, and the risk of the product. The IQA model is the new model for PAI determination under CONOPS program alignment. At the time of the submission, an integrated quality assessment team is assembled to perform the quality assessment of particular marketing applications. The IQA team provides aligned, patient-focused, and risk-based drug product quality recommendations, inclusive of drug substance, drug product manufacturing, and facilities. The unifying hallmark of IQA is the integration of the facility evaluation and inspection and review role of the application process. ORA investigators are fully apprised of any issues uncovered by CDER reviewers, and vice versa. When an investigator conducts a GMP inspection, we use profile codes to describe the types of dosage forms manufactured at a facility. So for example, we will use TTR for extended release tablets, or we'll use TDP for transdermal patches, so on and so forth. A determination of the compliance of each profile class is assessed by the investigator. The profile status may be acceptable or unacceptable, depending on the results of the inspection, which is NAI, VAI, or OAI. NAI being no action indicated, voluntary action indicated, and official action indicated. In the IQA model, the final determination for pre-approval is based on related profiles, process complexity, known site capabilities, previous inspection findings, and, if applicable, and product-specific attributes. This flow diagram describes the process for pre-approval facility inspection. It starts with the submission of application that the IQA team assesses the accuracy and the integrity of the application. The team determines whether a PAI is required. If yes, the inspection strategy is developed. REdI schedules the PAI and acts as the lead for the inspection. The team puts forward an approval or withhold recommendation, and the establishment inspection report is written. And then this firm flows into the surveillance inspection program. That's the meat of that diagram. I wanted to give a note for biotechnology firms. Currently, biotech firms the inspection are performed by CDER reviewers and investigators at Office of Process and Facilities and Office of Biotechnology Products, which have a focus on product, microbiology, and cGMP aspects of manufacturing for that product. Investigators are part of the review committee, and REdI does participate, but it's based on availability. Normally, REdI investigators will follow up with the surveillance of biotech firms. But the initial, normally, CDER leads. So when are PAIs not performed? If none of the above criteria are met, we may elect to waive the PAI, assuming that the establishment has an acceptable profile. So remember, if it's never been inspected, the likelihood of a PAI is high. If a compliance action is in process, like warning letter or injunction, we may recommend withholding approval without an inspection. And if the firm is not ready, we can recommend withholding approval without an inspection. At the beginning of every inspection, we ask the firm, before we even get started, are you ready for an inspection? And at that time, if we're notified that they are not, then we would move forward with the withhold recommendation. So what is the difference between a PAI inspection and a GMP inspection? A PAI inspection may be conducted during the developmental stage, so there may be limited or no commercial manufacturing ongoing. There's more emphasis on authenticity of data and application commitments. We may just look at product development, documentation, biobatch clinical data. We look at the analytical method development in a deeper level, and process validation may not be completed. And application administrative actions are result as approval or withhold instead of what we do with marketed products, which may be seizures or recalls. I've listed here some of the compliance program guides that investigators use when preparing for a pre-approval inspection. These compliance program guides are public information and are located on the FDA website. Our primary CPGM is the pre-approval inspection. We also have one for cGMP inspections for human drugs. These are just a few that I've listed. We have many more than this. This is not an all-inclusive list. We have one for sterile facilities. We have one for active pharmaceutical ingredient inspections, which we also use the ICHQ7 guidelines. And we also have one for BLA biotech inspection. Now we're going to move on to the second phase of the presentation, which are what is the investigator's objectives during the pre-approval inspection. The investigator strategy surrounds three main objectives: readiness for commercial manufacturing, conformance of application and commitments, and data integrity audits. We will review each objective in more detail in upcoming slides. At least one of the objectives may be met during a pre-approval inspection. Depending on the establishment type and the profile classes, the division will determine the degree of coverage. I just wanted to make a note that Objective 1 has 5 subcategories. And the first one is investigations and trends, material handling, contamination, procedures, and process feasibility. So at the start of an inspection, the investigator will display their federal credentials, issue the FDA 482 Notice of Inspection for domestic inspections only, and exchange business cards. The investigator will explain the purpose of the visit and ask if the firm is ready to be inspected. We will explain why we're at your firm and what the inspection will focus on. The investigator may set an agenda at this time, request a list of documents for review during the inspection, and also determine and confirm the products and profile classes that will be covered. Investigators may offer a daily wrap-up session at the end of each day to review any potential areas of concern and allow the firm an opportunity to clarify or present additional information. We want to make sure that we give you every opportunity to present so that we walk away with a clear understanding of what your firm does. The investigator will properly conduct a walkthrough of the facility to familiarize themselves with the facility and observe the manufacturing process. We may observe and look for apparent deficiencies with respect to, but not including to. And this is just a general list of things. This is not all-inclusive. But we'll look at the storage facilities of your raw materials and processed finished products, where you store your stability samples and where you store your retained samples. And we'll also go through those programs of how you sample and test those materials. So we're also going to look at your incoming inspection and release testing for raw materials. We'll look at your material flow, personnel flow throughout your manufacturing facility. We'll look at your utilities, so water system, your process gas, your HVAC system, and for sterile facilities, we'll look at HEPA filters that you have. We'll look at your production practices and each unit operation. This includes everything from compounding, blending, drying, granulation, compression for tablets. We'll also look at things that you do within the hood. And if you use the isolator or RABs, we'll look at aseptic technique and filling operations. If you have any lyophilizers, sterilizers, depyrogenations of container closures, et cetera, et cetera. If you do terminal sterilization, we want to look at that too. We're also going to look at your visual inspection program, and this is a mix for non-sterile and sterile products. So we'll want to look at your visual inspection program. We want to see what lighting is being used, the duration, and what backgrounds are being used. We'll want to look at your packaging and labeling program to make sure how you prevent any potential label mix-up, what your line clearance processes are. And we'll also look at your laboratories that you have on site. So if you have a chemistry lab, if you have a microbiology lab, we'll be performing a walkthrough of those facilities. And it might not be all in one day. It might be throughout the inspection. We may take time to look at the laboratories on a subsequent day. When we go to the stability chambers, we're going to look to see, your program, if the samples are in the right configuration, if they're in the right orientation, how the temperature and humidity is monitored, if there's any alarms on the chamber. So those are things that we may ask you while we're looking at your stability samples. And this is before we get into the actual documentation. The facilities and equipment review will also include room classifications for sterile operations, your microbial controls, sterility insurance, your environmental and personnel monitoring programs. We'll also look at equipment maintenance records, equipment use log and line clearance. We'll also look at your cleaning methods and your cleaning verification and validation program. We want to make sure that the equipment that is listed in the application actually exists at the facility. Okay? We're also looking at if the equipment is in any type of disrepair or improperly designed. We're going to spend a lot of time looking at personnel practices. We're going to ask ourselves, are personnel performing their duties as described in SOPs? Are personnel performing laboratory testing as per validated test methods and procedures? Is the employee training records and media files up to date? Is the employee wearing the adequate gowning for the production operation? Are batch records completed contemporaneously? Is there a high frequency of employee turnover? That's pretty important, because if by the time you're training an employee, they're already out the door, it may give us an understanding of what's going on with the quality of the facility. So now we're going to go into more detail of the objectives in more detail. So let's review the first objective, readiness for commercial manufacturing. The overall goal for readiness for commercial manufacturing is to determine if the firm is compliant with cGMPs, to evaluate the production and control systems, and to evaluate areas of potential adulteration. So each one of these topics is an ocean, and it's hard to summarize in a 30-minute presentation all this information. So what I thought would be better was to just give you some takeaways, just some things to think about when you think about this objective. Fair enough? Okay, so for objective 1A, is there a preventive action program in place to evaluate potential failure modes in order to prevent unexpected findings? Are their failure modes adequately mitigated? Does the firm complete investigations within timeframes, identify a root cause, and implement effective CAPAs? And are issues addressed globally? And if the firm taking a holistic approach to corrections, meaning extending the investigations to other batches or other products that may be affected? The firm must demonstrate that the products which will be produced with the changes is equivalent to the product used in clinical trials or biobatches. And if not, it needs to be highly justified and meet any regulatory submission requirements for review. The takeaways for Objective B, I'll let you read it on your own. Are multiple sources of components evaluated to select the best supplier in terms of quality and redundancy of sources? Vendor qualification of the API supplier and other critical vendors, and are the quality agreements in place? Are test methods validated? Analytical methods must be validated or transferred at the time of the pre-approval inspection. So the key takeaways for 1C. What is the impact of a new drug to the existing production environment? Is there a potential for cross-contamination with potent drugs, beta-lactams, or hormones? New products can present cleaning issues in existing equipment. So this objective, we're going to look at your cleaning verification and your cleaning validation program. Remember that equipment needs to be qualified for its intended use. We're looking at the ranges and the parameters as well during the review of the qualification document. The key takeaway for Objective 1D. This is a review of the Quality Control Unit, management, and procedures. Is there a quality unit? Is the quality unit involved in the review and approval of work products such as SOPs, methods, deviations, OOS investigations, annual product reviews, qualifications, protocols, reports, that all the documents need quality units? I think you get the point. Objective 1E. The takeaway here is all about process validation. Does the firm have full product and process understanding, identification and justification of critical control parameters, and and has the capability for full-scale commercial batch manufacturing? These are the questions that we're thinking about as we review your documents. Is documentation compiled pertaining to all the development activities and studies conducted to establish that the dosage form, formulation, process, and quality attributes are appropriate for the new product? Does it describe the formulation and process critical parameters that affect product quality? Does the development report adequately serve as the basis for justification of the process to support the filing? Process validation, in short, yields a product that meets predefined quality criteria, and it is an ongoing process. At the end, you want to minimize as much variability from lot to lot. Process validation is an ongoing program through continuous process verification through product life cycle to maintain a state of control. and it's not a one-time event. After commercialization, you'll receive more knowledge that will be gained, and that should be inserted back into the validation program. So what we're looking for is your validation master plan. So I just wanted to give you some of the expectations in terms of validation before commercialization. It may not be ready at the time of the pre-approval, but these are the FDA expectations before commercialization, before it gets to market. And this is for NDA and ANDA products. The expectation is that all the satisfactory product and process development, so it's thoroughly investigated. All the scale-up studies have been completed, and equipment qualification has been completed. Successful completion of initial conformance batches, so that's your PPQ batches validation, under normal conditions. And that the manufacturer has identified and controlled all critical sources of variability. This is the expectation, which will be followed up during surveillance or post-approval inspection, but before you market the product. So these are some examples of firms that are not capable of manufacturing products. If there's renovation of the facility or equipment not installed, no quality agreements between sponsors and establishment listed in the application, lack of appropriate controls to ensure quality, multiple batch failures not reported in applications. Objective 2, conformance to application. The objective here, I'm just going to put them all up, is to verify the adequacy of commitments made and accuracy of information submitted to the application. Investigators are to verify that the formulation, manufacturing or processing methods, and analytical methods are consistent with descriptions contained in the CMC section of the application or for the biobatch and the proposed commercial scale and the APIs. So we're going to observe the processing line and audit it against executed batch records, if applicable. But we're going to observe, if there is ongoing manufacturing, we're going to look at it retrospectively and see if that mimics what happened during the manufacture of the clinical batches. We're going to review the laboratory methods and compare that with the application to see that you're using something that was agreed upon and that any changes, again, has been through the proper review. We're going to review biobatch and assess comparability with the commercial scale process. We're going to ensure API supply is properly presented in the application, meaning that in the application you're using one supplier, but when we get there, all the material is from a different supplier. We're going to review raw data for biobatch and stability batches, including laboratory testing and manufacturing. So basically, whatever you submitted in the application, we're there to actually, with our eyes, boots on the ground, review what it is. Objective 3, data integrity audit. The regulations require that the data be retained, complete, and accurate. Submission of falsified data to the FDA is a criminal offense. And I've put there the regulation that discusses the true copy, and I've also put the law that talks about criminal violation for submitting falsified data. Investigators are to audit the raw data, hard copy or electronic, to authenticate the data submitted in the CMC section of the application. So here are some examples of data integrity issues that we've seen. Falsification of data, complete fabrication of sterility testing, environmental monitoring, WFI testing, biological indicators of sterilization, bioburden sampling, endotoxin testing. It doesn't exist. Never did. QA approval of incomplete or erroneous laboratory data. Changes of specifications to widen and not report to the application. Testing into compliance. Repeat testing until passing. Results. Deleting of initial results. Passing data submitted instead of failing data. Exclusion of specific lots from the stability program to avoid submitting failed results. And some of the red flags that would allude us to these things are manual processes, no complaints or ever any deviations or any out of specifications, no archival data. It may be the first to file application. A firm with a large volume of applications or rapid increase in number of filings. It's not possible to do all of that in a short period of time. That may give us a red flag. And the data is just too good to be true. That's a red flag. You may all be familiar with Alcoa. There's different versions of this. There's Alcoa, Alcoa Plus. It just keeps going on and on. So I'm just going to give you a brief overview of Alcoa. Data integrity refers to the completeness, consistency, and accuracy of data. Data should be Alcoa. Attributable. Who created the document? Who is working? Who's doing the work? Each document should be able to show who's actually, it should be attributed to a person. Okay? And that's normally captured by signatures, electronic signatures, user logins to electronic systems. Legible. Is the record readable? Can electronic data be retrieved? Contemporaneous. When was the record made? Original. Is this the source data? What is the source data? Where is the source data? Accurate. Can the data be trusted? And I think the Alcoa Plus has, the plus is attributable, legible, contemporaneous, original, accurate, complete, consistent, enduring, available. It's a lot. But again, it's an ocean. When we start looking at your data, some red flags that would allude us that we may have data integrity issue is if there's no raw data for sample preparation, for sample weights, sample solution preparation, sample dilution, there's just no data, raw data. So we found that electronic data integrity fits into about these 5 main types for data integrity issues. Trial sample analysis, and this is when we're looking at like chromatograms, HPLC, GC data. We find that these are general categories to which these type of manipulations are falling into. Trial sample analysis. Running the report sample sets before the official sample is run just to see if it meets specifications. Deletion of data. Deleting through audit trail and network design, meaning i.e. standalone computers. Testing into compliance. When undesirable results are encountered, samples just disappear. And it's retested until acceptable results are achieved. And of course, there's no laboratory investigations, all the raw data is destroyed, and electronic data is deleted. But we still found it. Backdoor manipulation, changing the sample weights to increase or decrease potency, integrating into compliance, decreasing the impurity peak cutoff points to achieve passing results, increasing or decreasing assay peak cutoff. It's an ocean, this topic. And administrative foul play, using the administrative privileges to turn off and on the audit trail or to set the clocks backwards so that you can repeat a run. So, what documents should the firm have available to review during the course of an inspection? So this is where you come in terms of preparing for a pre-approval inspection. Daily manufacturing schedules. This is how you can facilitate us so that we are able to see all the unit operations. Again, we may not be able to see everything in one day. So if we have the weekly schedule or the daily manufacturing schedule, it will help us plan our inspection more effectively. Complete product list. This also includes product development or products in development. If you're using commercial equipment for R&D, you may have issues with cross-contamination, cleaning validation. We want to see all the products that you're having, and so that we can understand a picture of what equipment is used for what products. Correspondence with the agency any deficiency letters, any supplements, or any amendments filed concerning the application, list of all submissions, dates of approval, pending submissions, refuse to file, all the agency communication back and forth. This helps, so what I like to do is, because part of the objective is to confirm what's in the application and the commitments, when we review regulatory history, if you can identify where you've made that change and implemented that change, it would be helpful for me and easier for me to do that confirmation. We also want the CMC for reference, a list of all batches, even those that were rejected, and a master batch record and all executed batch records. And again, this is for the product in question that we're there to review for the approval process. For the list of batches, identify the purpose of the batch. So if it was for an engineering study, a feasibility study, optimization, stability study, or a clinical study, we'd like to know what the purpose of that batch was, when it was manufactured, and the status, the disposition of that batch. If there's anything left, where are those samples located? Okay. Additional documents that are helpful are facility diagram, water system diagram, air handling systems, again, material flow diagrams, manufacturing flow chart, including in-process control parameters. So I like to have, before I do my walkthrough, I like to have a manufacturing flow chart for that product. That way I can follow the manufacturing process and also review the in-process checks and equipment that are being used throughout. It makes it more efficient. Equipment list, a complete equipment list, production and laboratory. Equipment qualification records, so that means IQ, OQ, PQs, and equipment maintenance records. And the equipment list should have the equipment identification numbers as well, so it helps me to cross-reference when I'm looking in your documents. It's just easier this way to just put it all up there. Okay. Other things that are helpful are the product development reports and summaries, because we are going to refer to that document to justify the parameters that you're chosen. Process validation plan and protocol and report, if available, depending on the stage where you are in your final PPQ. You may only have a protocol or draft of the protocol. That's fine. We want to see where you're going. And specifications and test methods for the product cover. So what I like to do is I like to take the certificate of analysis and just say, for all the tests, give me the test, the method, the SOP, and the acceptance criteria, and just do a thorough review there. If you are referring to the USP or any compendium method, you're to do a process verification in normal conditions at your facility. It's just not enough to just reference it. So when it comes to quality, your quality system, I like a complete list of the SOPs, like an index, and so that I can choose which SOPs I'd like to see. A list of all the out of specification batches, reasons, and the status of the investigation. A list of deviations, planned, unplanned. Something happened. I didn't do it. I was getting used to. Okay. A list of deviations, planned, unplanned, non-conform, incidents, anomalies. Every firm has a different way of calling it, but any non-conformances that have happened during manufacturing. A list of rejects, rework, reprocessing of batches if you do that. Change control, and all of this is the procedure as well as the list of events. Corrective and preventative action, summary of complaints, and this is for if you have marketed products at your facility. I'd like to see the complaints. It's also how you process complaints, even though it's not directly related to your product. It's just to understand your firm's process for handling complaints. and then any annual product reports, again, that's for marketed products, and annual product reviews, or product quality reviews for API. Okay, it's not going. So we have done the pre-approval inspection, and now we're at the end of the inspection, and we are going to make a recommendation. The inspection is one part of the approval process, so it's not the entire part. But at the end, the lead investigator will make a recommendation at the conclusion of the inspection. If the investigator states that they're going to recommend approval, it indicates that there's no significant issues that to delay the pre-approval. Not that there may be a 483, but it doesn't rise to the level enough to withhold the application. And if the investigator determines that a withhold, or it recommends a withhold of the application, it's because the investigator observed that the site is not compliant with GMP, the information in the CMC is not consistent with site records, or the information submitted is not accurate or complete. So responses to these observations that they give is critical to your process, because ultimately CDER has the final authority on approval and withhold approvals. And so you want to make sure you include all the information you can so that they can make a determination. So these are some examples of what could garner a withhold recommendation. Significant data integrity problems, including misrepresented data or other conditions related to the submission batches. Serious GMP concerns with the manufacture of a biobatch or demonstration batch, such as changes to formulation or processing that may cause FDA to question the integrity of the bioequivalence study. Significant differences between the process used for pivotal clinical batches and the NDA submission batches. Lack of complete manufacturing and control instructions, or lack of data to support those instructions. Lack of capacity to manufacture the drug product or the API. Basically, you said yourself that you're not ready. Here's more examples. Full-scale process validation studies were attempted prior to the PAI, but it demonstrates that the process is not under control and establishment is not making appropriate changes. Incomplete or unsuccessful method validations or verifications. Records for pivotal clinical or submission batches do not clearly identify equipment or processing parameters used. We can't trace what equipment went to what, then we don't know if it was actually done at that facility. Significant failures related to the stability studies that raise questions about the stability of the product or API. Failure to report adverse findings or failing tests without appropriate justification. So during the closeout meeting, we're going to discuss any discussion items. And these items are things that did not rise to the significance to be put on the FDA Form 483 if one is going to be issued to the firm. And then after the discussion items, we're going to issue the 483 list of observations to the top management, and that's if it's applicable. And then we're going to discuss the observations in detail so everybody's clear on what we observed. And normally, because we're doing daily wrap-ups every day, there should be no surprises at the end of the inspection. And then we're going to discuss withhold. We're going to discuss what we're going to recommend, if we're going to recommend an approval or withhold. So normally 483s fall in from top categories, and we kind of have four when it comes to PAIs. The first one is deficiencies in the design of operations and systems intended to ensure a state of control. The second, deficiencies in execution and performance. Third, data clearly indicating that control has been lost. And four, quality unit and management failures related to all of the above. And that's some of the kind of 483s that you may expect to receive for a pre-approval inspection. Questions?
Thank you, Lucia. And we're going to run questions just a little bit different. Lucia is going to be one of the people coming back to do the one-on-one questions with the folks here in the room in just a few minutes. So if you're here in the room and you've got questions, please hold those for there. I know that we have 2 online questions that came in that we wanted to get to. So let's go ahead and get our first online question, if we could, please.
What are FDA's expectations for process validation prior to marketing for NDAs, ANDA products?
So as I discussed before, we expect that your equipment is fully qualified, that you have done all of your studies, scale-up studies, and you know your product, and you know that your process is going to minimize as much variability as possible. We expect that before you go to market, that the PPQ batches, your validation batches, are completed. And again, that will be followed up during surveillance inspections or post-approval inspections. So it's not required for the pre-approval to necessarily have your process validation batches completed. All 3 are completed. But we want to make sure that you're on your way to doing so.
Okay, and our last online question.
If a contract manufacturer produces multiple products, is the PIA scope limited to the ANDA NDA application, or could documentation related to other products be reviewed?
Can you repeat the question?
If a contract manufacturer produces multiple products, is the PIA scope limited to the ANDA and NDA application, or could documentation related to other products be reviewed?
So if we're doing a PAI at a contract manufacturer, we're going to focus on that product. However, because of cleaning validation, the manufacturer has to show how he can limit, or how the firm limits the residues and cross-contamination. So not necessarily that we'll be reviewing the other products, but we'll be reviewing your program to see how you ensure that that is happening. So there are some aspects that are cross-cutting, because if the equipment is not dedicated, then they have to show how the cleanability of their equipment.
Okay. And I asked Lucia to give us some final words of wisdom. I believe you have one last slide there, kind of a call to action.
Okay. So something that I run into a lot is we can make 50 to 100 to 200 requests during the inspection process. So what I've seen successful companies do is have a robust document request system for each inspection. You want to ensure that your firm has an established system for documenting FDA requests during the inspection. So if there's someone on a laptop sending things back to the back room, you want to make sure that there's a good flow to capture each request. You want to ensure that the documents are readily available. Once you submit the application, you know that we're going to come eventually. So after the long list of documents that I have presented in the presentation, these documents need to be readily available. And then you want to make sure that the requests are addressed in a timely fashion. If you're not keeping track of all the requests, this may become a stopgap, which may lead to the inspection going on longer than it has to. So the first takeaway call to action is just please ensure you have some way of organizing the document request, because it can be a bit much. Ensure that the appropriate personnel are available to provide explanation. I know that a lot of the top managements want to give us a beautiful explanation, but we really want to hear from the people who are actually doing the operations. So we want to hear from the production, we want to hear staff, we want to hear from the laboratory analysts. So please make available the people who are actually doing the work, because they know more and are able to explain why better than top-up management. And those are my takeaways. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Lucila.